presentations which have been made, hoping that these condensed briefs can help you also, but also just depend much on the presentations that have been shared with you. Thank you, Dr. Vui. I think and
2 seconds of questions at the end.
yes, yeah, yes.
Okay. Do we have any questions? Colleagues? Any questions, worries? We are good? Okay, move back.
Afternoon, Prof.
Afternoon.
Thanks for the lovely presentation. Mine is just more like a pointer seeking advice. I've noticed that most of the papers you've done in the introduction have got 3 or 4 paragraphs. So in terms of strategy, how do you normally package them? In terms of content, paragraph 1, 2, 3, or where you go for 4 paragraphs?
Let's say, for example, the introduction.
Yes.
Yes, thank you for that. In terms of that, sometimes we'll have some write-ups in which maybe the introduction is just 2 paragraphs. Sometimes we just find an elongated narration, and then we have a just small paragraph, another small paragraph. I think it depends. Now, if you look at the major components of the introduction, what questions you have to address, I think you can look at the flow and try to group them according to the components. Let's say, for example, I will just pick the introduction here, okay? In terms of, because we will be looking at maybe the main questions, what is known about the broad topic, what are the gaps addressed? So this will actually be in harmony to actually constitute a paragraph. And then now when you go to addressing the issues of the rationale and the hypothesis, one maybe would appreciate maybe that now you start a new paragraph, and maybe the significance of your study becomes another paragraph or is part of this. So it's actually up to you, because when you write and you flow, you can really tell which appears to be synchronized as one part of the introduction. Yes, but of course, when I meet with you on one-on-one, following on your paper of yesterday, I think we'll discuss that in detail a little bit. Yes, okay. And while we're there also, I know that in terms of now helping you to finalize your manuscript, maybe that is not that feasible. Where possible, yes, we do that. Yesterday also we are asking for those who have manuscripts to send them so that we look at them. Even here we'll still do it. Even some of them you can send them after we have closed the workshop. But whatever we can do even today, let's take advantage of it. I know that sometimes really a whole paper here might not be helpful, but we can go through them and say, help me on this component and let's see how it goes. Maybe also, maybe Dr. Fritz wanted to say something.
Sorry for that, Professor Moalafhi. I think you very perfectly described in response to the question what needs to be done. Quite often you see that the introduction really will only be 3 or 4 paragraphs, with the 4 points being introducing the topic, sketching what is known about the topic, the knowledge gap, and then producing what you're going to do. And I think the last 2 parts often are collapsed into one paragraph, where one paragraph is introducing, one paragraph is introducing the topic, one paragraph is what is known about the topic, and then sometimes either have 2 or 1 either collapsing, or have 2 paragraphs on what is not known, knowledge gap, and exactly what you're going to do, what the aims are.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Fritz. Yes, we have another question from Mauricio.
Yes. My question is, I have difficulty to check the innovation. For example, I'm doing water quality index. I went to field, I did data collection, I analyze my sample. How can I check the innovation. For example, if I did something differently, if it harder, or just compare my performance result, I have a difficulty to get the innovation between mine and the previous studies.
Novelty of the question I asked yesterday.
Okay. Yes. I think, thank you for that question. Dr. Fritz will come in here also. But I think from the quality assurance processes that led to your study or proposals also being approved through the processes and having defended it through the faculty you are registered. Of course, it tells me that there's some novelty in there. Because at the end of the day, when we make a proposal, of course, the introduction will still be there, which is a brief literature review which converges and highlights your hypothesis and the gaps. Okay? And then in that way motivates or justifies your study. You're going to have the justification for the study and the statement of the problem. I think somewhere around this, just reconnect with your first love, which is when you really felt strongly to propose. Not for a beam, but propose your study. Somewhere it's there. We can sit down. It's normal that when you do your study, sometimes you feel like this is useless. It's normal. But try to reconnect. You also have the supervisory team. Sometimes you can really feel like I want to terminate it. We can sit down and discuss that. It's normal. And somehow, because you have gone through this rigor, the novelty sometimes also depends on how you present your work. Sometimes you might not even see. Sometimes you have some peers to appreciate what you are doing. But because also you are in great hands of supervision, I think it's only that now we are getting to gear 4. And sometimes you say, hey, I wish I can take some setback a little bit. It's the same as when you write a paper, sometimes you develop it, sometimes you feel like it doesn't make sense. Take a break, do some other things. When you come back, sometimes you're going to realize that really, no, this is something. Get feedback from colleagues. And before I give it to you, Dr. Fritz, you want to say something on this one?
I think you quite well captured that. The innovation point can really links up to 2 things already. One is when you define the objective of your study, already there's some innovation in there that you can define. And then at the point we do analysis, then you can check back again to what the knowledge gap was, the analysis that you present now. How does that take the field forward? Already there can be an innovation point. I have to say, innovation is not something that necessarily jumps out at you when you do your research. Sometimes it is something that you actively have to try and identify at whatever point. When it comes to papers, what should be remembered very well is that whereas a big part of your paper is descriptive, the object of a paper can never be to be only descriptive. The innovation point is very key to that. An example of that, for instance, is case studies. Case studies often don't go beyond the level of description. It can be very informative. It can offer the reader great insights in terms of data collection, what have you. But ultimately, a case study contains very little, if anything, on innovation. And by extension, that also means for journal papers, you will very, very infrequently see a case study in a journal. If a case study is allowed, usually the requirement is you have to add extra information. And that extra information will, again, link back to innovation. But as I said, innovation can be elusive. It can be difficult to detect what is actually the innovation in the work that I did. Professor Moalafhi already talked about there. Your supervisory team is very important to also help you guide that, because sometimes when we engage in research, we're so immersed in all the data we've collected, in the methodology that we use, that it is difficult to rise above that and see what actually is the innovation, because it will be there. It just needs to be found.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Fritz. Faith, you want to say something?
We have Faith.
I think you've actually responded partly, because for me, innovation, I think it's something that's quite elusive. So I wanted you to say, like innovation is A, B, C. Is it something that you only find in the results, like tangible? That's sort of the pressure that I get to succumb to when I'm asked, so where's the novelty or where's the innovation? Like I almost want to say, oh, like this is the innovation, but from what you're saying, it can actually be maybe weaved through the whole process. I don't know.
Yes, I think you are very right, because also we will have to make a distinction between innovation and technology. So innovation is available across all the spectrum, whether it's social science or anything, because to innovate is to find some, how can I put it? Is to find some inspiring ways of resolving issues which the advancement of the subject matter has not been able to find, somewhere around that. Because then innovation in that way, then you'll find it across, irrespective whether you're talking with the numbers, descriptive, or you are talking quantitative. But of course, technology would be something else. But technology still can be applied across. But then, like you are saying, sometimes it's difficult to find innovation. But as long as there's a gap that you are feeling, that innovation enough, because you are developing or proposing new ideas. To innovate is to propose a new ways through which to look at different perspectives of a subject matter, or even bring solutions which have been eluding the past researchers within the area. So I know that when you write, sometimes you don't find it, because it's always your work. If somebody reads it, maybe they find it, always peer review, let's do this. And sometimes you think you are stuck. Check with the supervisors, check with us. But of course, having gone through the rigor, the novelty is there, innovation is there, of course.
Okay. Do you have any other, Catherine?
I have one question. There's this notion on the theory of change, evolution that is required. I don't know, they say use that theory of change to show the impact of your research. And it has been a bit of a challenge for me to kind of like incorporate it in my study. I don't know if you could speak to that.
Yes, because that theory of change, I know that when you talk about issues like change management, now a little bit moving as if I'm going to HR issues, self-mastery. If you know what you want, your value system, then you can talk about interpersonal skills and then change management. But that one, really, I don't know how to answer it. Maybe Dr. Fritz can help with that one.
Maybe what is change to start with, because we are lost. I can't follow. I know
it in applied research. I know it in applied research. Where you can proceed, Dr. Fritz.
I didn't quite get the question at the beginning because the sound is cutting out. Did you perhaps you can just rephrase or repeat the question, because I couldn't hear. Are you talking about theory of change or fear of change?
Oh, she's talking about theory of change. I'm not sure if you've seen it, but it's more common in applied research, where, for example, I know it when you apply, for example, for funding like GF, where you put in your objective and then you map what is going to be the output, and then the receivers of that innovation, whatever you're coming with. And then so basically we are showing how the objective will have impact to the end user. So that's what you're talking about. Am I correct? Yeah. So I know it from the applied research perspective. I'm not sure in academia.
That's a difficult one, because it's a little bit more question that I think should be answered within research. and within publishing, because there you essentially talk about an issue that is very integral to the way you do research. There you, for instance, bump up against what are the institutional pediments, or what is the framework pediments of how that defines your research. But once again, I'm not sure I caught all of the questions. I'm a little bit reluctant to give a long response to this. Sorry for that.
Okay.
Yeah, even for me, really, it's a challenge because, of course, some of these things when we do, maybe we are subscribing to the theory of change because we are striving for change, for improvement. But maybe the issue of, we'll reflect on it.
Yeah, I kind of like once approached a research through this method. I was told you are envisioning what would be the outcome of your research as your target for the theory. Then you put the methods that you use, and then you put like at the same time you are putting what will not be part of the research also as part of it's like you are painting your research within that framework of theory of change, so that at the end of the day you can analyze whether your outputs were impactful or not.
Yeah, because I think some of these you'll do a little bit of this, like if maybe you summarize your work, we have the research grid, because you have the objectives, the research process, the methodology, the output, and the outcome. So the outcome, when now you get the bigger picture, what you are contributing to based on your output. One way or the other, it's something that we are doing. Maybe it's the terminology that also as they emerge, because we need to see that we understand them to really frame our contribution within those frameworks. I think that's something that is very interesting.
It has reminded me of one aspect that we didn't discuss, the graphical abstracts that some journals ask us to do. So I was thinking probably that theory of change could apply when you are coming up with your graphical abstract.
Yes, very much, because at the end of the day, sometimes you have these frameworks, sometimes methodological framework, conceptual framework. Now, when you go to the graphical abstract, this is where you will be trying to summarize your research. Of course, you will be highlighting the variables, the key variables, the intervening variables, and also showing the internal processes through and the outputs and so on. I think that's something which is interesting. We have seen that also. We have this abstract, graphical abstract, which is becoming common.
Okay, Dr. Fritz, do you want to talk about? Do you want to say anything on graphical abstracts? Dr. Fritz?
Sorry, can you just say it again? I hear almost nothing at the moment.
Okay, sorry. There was one student who was asking about graphical abstracts, how one can come up with a graphical abstract.
Yes. Many journals have moved to making this a fixed requirement. Initially, when graphical abstracts started, it was more of a voluntary thing, where if you really have one good visual that captures everything that you did, if you the specific process that you, for instance, sketch, great. Use that as an abstract. But a lot of journals have now actually moved to making that mandatory, which is a challenge for a lot of authors. I have to say you mostly see this in the applied sciences, in journals that where a lot of analysis will be limited to textual description. You won't easily find that in a journal that is, or discipline that is more akin to using a lot of visuals in a paper. That is a kind of journal that would be more leaning towards adding graphical abstract. Some journals make it mandatory, but if you don't supply it, they will just say, well, it's mandatory. If you don't supply anything, we'll just use the first image. that you apply in the journal. That could be ideal. That could already sketch a big part of what you're going to do, maybe not. When in doubt, I would say most journals, if it's mandatory, will give you a fairly good description of what a graphical abstract should be like. However, that may not be up to what you still want, in which case contact the journal to ask them for a little bit more guidance. It is the case that it can be challenging for a lot of authors, especially if the graphics that they generated simply came out of certain tables, or there was one sketch that showed a process. But obviously, a lot of authors are not really very equipped to come up with a process to devise that. What I would advise there is start by at the point you've actually do write a textual abstract, and see whether there is some way in graphic software that you can just translate that in some ways. Usually, if you also look at the imagery, you already have the graphs or the tables that you already have in your article. There might be building blocks there that you can very easily take portions of that and plug it into the graphical abstract. Another way around that is you also have a lot of free software to create flowcharts. A flowchart might also be a very good way to help you get to a view on what exactly it is that you want to sketch. But very importantly, if you look at the bulk of graphical abstracts that you see, sometimes it might actually just cover the main part of a little bit of the methods, the results, and a little bit of the conclusion that's put in a graphically understood way. So I wouldn't be too worried about that. The once or twice you've done that, you quite get into the rhythm of being able to visualize what you want to put forward. But the key part for that is always start in writing, even though the journal might not require a textual abstract in addition to the graphical abstract. Even though then I would say write for yourself a textual abstract before you start thinking on how can you put that into a picture.
Okay, thank you. Any other question? I have one, Prof, maybe to Prof. And mine is on the, you talk about the time period at which one can publish your work. I know, I just want to find out what is the general overview and rule in terms of the period between the time you've collected your data and the time when you still have time to publish your work. I know in water quality studies, though, like when you do monitoring, they would not allow something like something like more than 2 years or something like that. I want to find out what is the general rule, for example, like in qualitative studies, usually just for help for us to know, to say, like I can still publish a certain portion of my PhD I cannot publish because that time is elapsed now. So I just want to find out the overall, what is the rule usually to say this data now is too old to be published? And I'm not sure if Dr. Fritz or you, Prof.
Yes, I think Dr. Fritz will help on that one. But from my experience is that what I usually advise and what I'm usually mindful of is that once I do some research, the time what justified or motivated my research would have been the gap. So if I prolong, somebody is likely to fill that gap, in which when I come, I'm irrelevant. But what I've seen also, I know my undergraduate thesis, my undergraduate dissertation, I published it after something like 10 years, and now I'm a lecturer. Why? Because I saw that there was good in it, which I didn't pick. But the data is old, but still that journal allowed it to go through. So I think maybe this could be thematic area specific. I don't know, but the main issue generally for me is that always publish as quickly as possible while you are still relevant, while the data gap that you identified, maybe somebody has not picked it. Because anyway, it's difficult for you to be always alert to say, to check, to validate that this gap is still there. because a lot of things are coming in. Maybe the time when we publish, maybe the data collection devices have also changed, even if the gap is still there, then maybe it invalidates your data. I think Dr. Fritz also can speak to that.
I actually find it hard to come up with another point because you summarized that very well. First of all, again, what you said, if you take too long, the knowledge gap that you identified in your paper, that actually will be the novelty or the innovation point. If you take too long, somebody else is going to fill that knowledge gap, and your paper is going to be redundant, because when you get to a journal, an editor-in-chief, or if it's accepted for review, will point out to you that, well, it's been done. So what exactly is the added value of this article? The other point is to what I can describe as to make an assessment of what is the shelf life of my data. If you look, for instance, particularly within climate change, a lot of data dates very, very quickly. If we're looking at climate change challenges, in particular, if we look, for instance, at how mitigation policies can be developed in response to certain climate change challenges, that challenge may be substantially different in 2 years' time. So the data might just be outdated, or even worse, it might be completely irrelevant. So same as a product that we buy in a supermarket. Of course, as we know, if you buy something in a supermarket, a lot of the sell-by dates don't really apply, because a lot of lobbying has gone in to why that is a sell-by date. A little bit of that also applies within research. Not all data expire very quickly, but nevertheless, it is good to, in your field, develop a sense of the shelf life of data. You can do that by also looking at what is being published. If there is a gap that is similar to yours in articles that got published recently, you're fine. If you see that a lot of data published in a similar topic has a much more recent period, there you run the risk of submitting to a journal where the point is made that we feel the data is a little bit outdated, so therefore we're not sure it can support the conclusions that you present here.
Thank you so much. That was. Do you have any other question, colleagues? Okay, this brings us to the end of our session today. I'm sorry for this period. So the time is 9 minutes to 1. Dr. Fritz, we have resolved that we will go for lunch now, because it's almost lunch, and then we'll meet at 2. So we'll separate like we did yesterday for the one-on-one. So at 2, we will have the one-on-ones. But firstly, we will come up to this main room just to make sure the other computer is working well in the other room. Then we will get off the platform. Then you will remain with the other group online. Thank you so much. We meet at 2.
Great. Thank you very much. I'll see you then. Have a lovely lunch.
Thank you so much. Enjoy your lunch too.